In this video tutorial, I'm working on the sales screen, and the intent of this video is to show you how to work with invoices when you're working on the actual print invoice. But before we do that, I want to point out a few things you need to know before you go there. First of all, the sales ID is very important. You should know what the sales ID of an invoice is, and you should also know the person. When you add an invoice into the record and you pick it from the drop-down list, what you want to do is you want to pick the person that you're actually doing the invoice for. Let's look one more time. You can have a walk-in client, which is a default for not going to use a person's name in here, or the actual person from your client records would be added here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look down here and we're going to see that we have all of our summary information for the invoice. And then you would have added all the rows for all the items that you're going to add to the actual invoice for the purchases that are being made. Now, the one thing I want to point out is that when you go to the invoice, you need to remember the name and the sales ID because those become crucial. And it is also helpful to remember the invoice date that you're working with. So let's go over and we're going to drop down the list here. We're going to go down to Sales Invoice Screen. When you go to the Sales Invoice Screen, typically when you come to the screen, if you haven't done a search prior to this using the find, you will probably see all the records that are currently in for all the invoices. It would start with the lowest number first and then show them all going up. Now what you want to do is you want to narrow this down to either a single invoice number, or the person and all the invoices for that person, or the person and the date of the invoice that you're looking for. You can do it that way, or it's very easy to just use the sales invoice ID if you know it. And then we're going to talk about how to do a range of invoices. So let's start the find, and then I'm going to show you how to do this. So we go over here to start find. What I want to do is I want to click in here, and I could pick a person's name. If I pick the person's name, I may also want to click on a date to get a specific invoice number. But I'm going to show you what happens when you click here. It's going to be a little odd because what it's doing is it's telling you number one invoice was for this person, number two is for this person. Well, being this is a scroller, it's not going to allow you to edit in this field. So what you're going to need to do if you're going to do a date range, something, or I should say an invoice range, I'm going to look at the date range up here to get the idea of how it's done. Now this little narrative up here talks about getting an invoice number using the ID, and then it shows you if you're on a Mac or a PC or on the cloud, you could be using this input over on a field where there is an actual date. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to go to the ID and we're going to shift over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start in by using the greater than or equal to. And then we're going to put a date or ID number. And I'm going to put in 1 since there's a starting invoice. Now why would we do this on an invoice range? Say for example you want to see all the invoices for any date range, a day, a week, a month, a quarter, or whatever. You could see all the invoices for that period of time. This also works when you're in a list view or you're in a report where you want to actually get a range of particular invoice numbers. Now on the iOS version of this application, that is the best way to get the actual records that you want to view is taking the starting range, which is the first invoice number. And how do you do that? If you're in the actual edit invoice window, and you look at the first one on the first of the month, and say it's number 1, just for an example, and at the end of the month it was number 20, you would start in by putting greater than or equal to 1, which makes it equal to 1, or less than or equal to, let's do less than or equal to, which is the left pointing arrow, and equal to, and then the ending number. In this case, I could put 20, but I'll just put 2. If I put 20 in there, it's going to get all the invoice numbers that go up to 20 or equal to 20. And then all I have to do is come over here and say, perform the find. It flips over and it shows me this little dialog. It says none of them omitted and 1 in selection. What that means is that I only picked 1 record. If this comes up normally, it'll show you all the number of records that you have in your database and then how many did you actually select. And if you select more than 1, you're going to see a number greater than on the right-hand side than 1. Okay, now we have the record we want to look at. We can go ahead and print. Go over to Action down here and say print, or if we want to export the record, we could export the record. Note that this little brown arrow right here tells you that everything above here and to this side will print, and nothing on this side will print. So if you have your printer set up where you have a Wi-Fi printer for your iPad, or if you're on a PC or Windows, you could hook it up to your computer. You could print this invoice from this screen. And then you could also send it as a PDF or a email on the iPad by using the information that allows you to print when you go to the print dialog on the iPad using iOS's version. When you go to the print dialog, let's do this, you'll see that you can actually create a PDF here. You can say PDF, you can either view it, email it, or save it to the actual iPad. And that would probably go over to your Photos library where you can then email it later or just have a copy on board for it. If you want to view it, you can just bring it up on the screen to verify everything and see it. Now, one of the things about why this is set up as a multi-line invoice where you can do an infinite number of records is that when you go to print it, it won't just print what it can see, it'll print all the records in this invoice. So say if you had 10, it would print the 10 if it were for ID number 2. But if ID number 2 had 50, then it would do page after page until it hit 50 and did all those items. So that's what I want to point out to you, and it shouldn't be too hard to do this and accomplish any of the things you want to do with printing. If you have any problems, contact the developer support. You can chat online or send us an email. Thank you.